Hey guys, Mr. E here, and you might notice that you're watching YouTube within YouTube right now. This is actually Reginald's video. You might know Reginald. He is another Darktide content creator sometimes. And he is making a little video here. It's 15 minutes long, but only a minute and 30 of it is him actually giving his opinions. In classic Reginald fashion, he shows up, says his piece, and then pieces out. So I'm going to kind of summarize his 1 minute and 30-second point here and then dig into it a little bit further because I think there's some meat on these bones and ultimately what he is trying to say. And Reginald can see this and chime in if he thinks I'm like misrepresenting him or something, is that Darktide has a good number, an increasing number of skills and abilities and weapons that are threatening to turn the game into something more akin to an MMO like Warframe, where the player skill expression is removed from the equation, and instead you're relying on egregiously powerful weapons and tools at your disposal to solve large, vast swaths of the combat puzzle. And that's a phrase that I've always loved using, and Reginald uses it in this video, and so big ups for that. But yeah, the combat puzzle is the fundamental thing that I think makes this game fun, right? It's the fact that there can be so many moving pieces all at one time, and then it's up to you as the player to use your own player skill and your knowledge of the game to ascertain which pieces need to be moved first and in which order, and then execute the plan, and then use your mechanical skill to actually execute properly. And doing that right wins you games, and doing it wrong loses you games. But as the game has gone on, especially since the recent rework of the Ogren class and now the introduction of the RBB's class, we have a growing set of things that are trivializing that combat puzzle, that you just point it at the combat puzzle and you press the button, and then all of a sudden 1/10 of the puzzle is solved for you instantly. One of those things, as you probably noticed in the footage here, is definitely the Rumbler. The Rumbler is exploding the combat puzzle with wanton disregard for any sort of accuracy or skill expression at all. So yeah, what do we do about this is the question, right? His contingents, or what am I saying? His contention here is that nerfs need to happen. And I totally understand that perspective. I am here today to give both the best and worst scenario for all three interested parties in this balancing discussion, because I kind of find myself somewhere between all those three. I thought I'd be a good candidate to give my opinion and sort of some perspective on that. And we all want the best possible outcome, right? But that can't happen, as you'll see when I start to discuss these. So as a disclosure, this does have some bleed over with my video the other day, where I talked about whether or not RBBs is overpowered and what I think ultimately will happen about that. And that, I mean, generally in the sense of we can kind of determine what the best outcomes for the two of the cohorts here are from understanding what it is that makes these players feel like weapons and abilities are overpowered, what it is that starts to detract from their enjoyment of the game. Because at the end of the day, for all three contingencies, for all three cohorts that are involved in this puzzle, the most important thing is that the game remains fun and that people want to keep playing the game. So let's talk about our three groups. The first group that wants to keep playing the game, wants the game to be fun, is the high skill, high experience players. These players derive fun from this game by challenging themselves, by having the game give them lots of challenge, and by them overcoming that challenge through player skill expression. So the best possible outcome for these players would be if the game is put into a state where in whatever means necessary, by either by buffing some things and nerfing some others, or nerfing only, or whatever. But the best possible scenario is that if skill expression, personal player skill expression, remains the most important factor in determining whether you win or lose in perpetuity. The real thing that these players run up against, the real thing that starts to grind their gears, is when there are crutches out there, when there are things that are more powerful than player agency, than player skill expression, that can just decide whether or not things win, whether or not you win encounters for you. And increasingly, I think that is happening, that we're seeing more and more things added to the game, that if you bring this build, then you will just win way more than if you didn't. And so they want to avoid that, right? They want every game to be decided by whether or not you played well. And you can't really play well when you're playing Rumble or Ogren, right? You just kind of pointed at the biggest group of enemies and you fire. And that in itself is a problem. So that's their best possible outcome. Their worst possible outcome, by contrast, would be if the game was only buffed from here on out. If only buffs ever happened to players, and then there was no adjustment to difficulty to compensate for that ever. That would be an absolute nightmare for these players, because now they would be far too strong, like all the character classes would be far too strong to ever really have a fair shake and make anything challenging ever again. So how do you even know if you're good at a game if it might just be the fact that you're playing on X broken class that carried you to that win? And that is the nightmare future that they're trying to avoid. Now, for right now, they're kind of okay, because there's just a certain subset of weapons and abilities that are just very obviously broken, and if you just don't abuse those, then you have a pretty fair fight on your hands. But what happens when more and more weapons start to approach the power level of Arbides and Ogren and their best stuff? What happens when all the classes in the game are as strong as Ogren or Arbides is, right? If nothing gives, then the game won't be very difficult at all, and therefore there'll be no player skill expression needed. You just, blow stuff up and you see things forever. So that's their nightmare scenario and their best scenario, right? Let's go into our second cohort of players, which would be the more casual players, the low expertise players who haven't invested a whole lot of time in this game. These players would love, their best possible scenario would be if more buffs and more power came to the game. And I know this doesn't represent all players within this cohort. I've definitely seen comments from some of these players who are saying that, hey, that's not me. I understand that balance needs to be both buffs and nerfs. But if we look at the Steam reviews, if we look at the ways players have reacted to other companies such as Arrowhead nerfing things, this really bends these players all the fuck up. They really, really, really do not want there to be any nerfs to the game at all, ever, and it bums them out thinking about that inevitability that something might be nerfed and something won't be as good tomorrow as it was today. So they really don't want that to happen, in part because when you have powerful things in the game, if you're a middle player, it can enable you to take on the highest level content. And for players who don't have as much experience at the game, I mean, I was in this cohort at one point, the most satisfying feeling is winning a game. The first time you beat Havoc 40, you're like, oh, fuck yes. Like, I finally fucking did it. And the first time you beat it, you'll pull any hook, crook, and trick out of the bag possible. You'll cheese shit. You'll use the most powerful, crazy-ass builds. You'll use abuse like broken bugs and stuff like that. And I still find myself doing that from time to time because I like winning. But after a while, it gets less enjoyable just to win, and you want to actually have a good fight on your hands. And so this group of players really just wants to win that dominating victory a lot of times because they're trying to prove themselves. They're trying to ascend the difficulties. Versus the high skill players who have been around for a while and they've won their fair share of battles already. They're not worried about that too much. They're mostly worried about making the fight a good fight. They would rather, the high skill players, or the high experience players, would rather would rather suffer a Pyrrhic loss than win a hugely dominant victory. They don't want to just roll over the enemies as we're seeing in this footage here. They want to have a good fight in their hands. So that's the difference between these two cohorts of players. And so you can see already that even with just two parties considered here, we're already at odds. There's not really a way to square this circle super well. I'm going to try my best after I finish rambling here to do that, to come up with an idea that does kind of teeter on actually addressing the opposing viewpoints here, but we'll see if you guys think that's any good at all. The third party to consider here, and the most important party to consider, is Fat Shark. Fat Shark decide what happens ultimately, right? And their motives, their best possible scenario is tied with their motives, which is making money. and being a successful company. And you can't be a successful company if you have a really balanced, good game that no one wants to fucking play because it's, you know, it's pissed all the players off and they left. So what happens is that the large cohort of more casual players who want more buffs to the game, they tend to dictate the direction of the development of the game, because they do, you know, whether you like to admit it or not, they do have sway over Fat Shark's decisions. If you need proof of this, look no further than how many times has anything large and considerable been nerfed since the Power Sword was nerfed like years and years ago, right? That nerf to the Power Sword caused there to be basically a hate campaign where everyone went and brigaded the Steam page and crashed the Steam ratings into mostly a negative. Not that they didn't deserve it to some extent, but Fat Shark like openly reacted to that. Like, it was very noticeable, the reaction they had to that really put a damper on their plans to nerf and ballast things for a very long time afterwards. And since then, I can't think of one sizable nerf that we've had to any weapon in the game, and Lord knows there's ones amongst the roster that definitely need it, but they are very hesitant to do it because of that backlash from the vast majority of players. And you can see that reflected even today. I mean, these Steam downvote brigades have happened multiple times where people go and review bomb over proposed nerfs, including one just like a week ago or 2 weeks ago when the proposed patch notes, like, you know, quote unquote, leaked about what's going to happen to the dueling sword and the plasma gun. And of course, the first thing people did is go and review bomb, probably for a game they haven't played for more than 5 or 10 hours. So players are just really, especially in that low skill, low investment cohort, are really eager and fine with going and review bombing, and that ultimately does hurt the game. Whether you think it's like silly, like, oh man, who even looks at Steam review scores or not, it actually does, because players that are being told by their friends, oh, you should pick up this game, they'll go and look at the game on Steam, and then they'll see that it has a mostly negative recent reviews and be like, oh, maybe not actually. Or worse yet, if you perhaps even have friends who are in that middle cohort of players who are now pissed off that their favorite thing got nerfed, and what are you going to go and tell all your friends? That they should buy Darktide? No. You're going to tell them that the fucking devs for Darktide don't know what the fuck they're doing, and this is a terrible time to play the game because everything just got nerfed and it's all shit. Like, that's what they'll be hearing from people. So in order to keep people buying the game, in order to keep being successful, what is Fat Shark going to do, right? They're going to continue power creeping stuff. They're going to continue buffing up the classes. Because if they don't, if they start nerfing things, players are going to get very unhappy very fast. And that is going to hurt their bottom line. So what we should expect out of Fat Shark is the thing that's going to help their pocketbook the most. And that is going to be continuing to make powerful classes like Arbites and Ogre. Because they have to have looked at the metrics for the game. I mean, I've seen this in my, like, you know, the metrics for like my video views. When new powerful stuff is added to the game, new powerful weapons, new powerful classes, all that stuff, that is what people are interested in. That's what gets eyes, that's what gets clicks and purchases, and therefore it's going to help Fat Shark's bottom line. So they have to have noticed that Ogren and Arbites by extension have been the most successful things they've had in any recent memory, and so they're going to continue doing more of that. So here we come to the crux of the situation, right? You have these three opposing viewpoints. One that's kind of really on its own. The high skill players who have a very vested interest in seeing this game remain dominated by primarily player skill, right? As we said. And that puts them invariably at odds with the other two cohorts, the players and Fat Shark themselves, because these cohorts want more player power because it makes them feel powerful, it makes them feel excited about playing the game, and therefore it sells more games and it makes more profit for Fat Shark. So what are we going to do, right? How do we keep all these parties happy? Well, you know, logic would dictate, since that the smallest cohort of players and the one that's least likely to do damage to the game on the whole is those really dedicated players, you know, logic would dictate that they should take the biggest L here, and that would be the compromise. They should take an L, and then everybody else will get a victory, and then most people will be happy, right? But I think I can do better than that. I don't think we need to make players who've spent thousands and thousands of hours playing this game just suck it up and just deal with the fact that the game has devolved into a thing that they don't like anymore. What I believe is that there should be a competitive balance patch for this game. I think that there should be two different operative rule sets depending on what sort of game you choose to engage with. When you're playing anything up through Auric on the main mission terminal, standard rules apply, right? Use your fucking Rumbler, use your Arbites, use your veteran shout, like use the most overpowered stuff in the game. Who fucking cares, right? This is where 99.9% of those casual 20-hour Andes who are going to go and review bomb the game on Steam when they've only, touched the game and they haven't touched it since 2023 and they're still complaining about solo mode. This is where those players live if they are still in fact playing the game at all. The players that are in the expert cohort, the players that are affected by this balance and don't want to overpower the challenge of the game, those players are playing Havoc. And this is where I think Havoc being its own environment, its own set-aside play space with entry requirements, right? You have to be in a party in order to play it. And it's not in the same terminal as the other stuff is. I think to me, that says that Havoc needs to have its own completely different set of rules. And this is something they've already tinkered with, right? They've already made it so that in Havoc, you might not know, but Psyker venting on stabs is nerfed. Your health and toughness are nerfed. Your ammo, obviously, your ammo collection is nerfed. They realize that there are things in this new game mode that players in normal games could definitely abuse, and so they went about making a different rule set. But I'm saying what they need to do is take that to the nth degree. Really nerf some stuff within the Havoc game mode, because by the very nature of you pressing the play button on the Havoc game mode, what you're saying is, please hurt me. I want to have a bad time, because for me, having a bad time is actually having a good time. I want to suffer through this, and when I come out on the other side victorious, that will be the greatest day of my life. So if you make things harder on these players, they are self-selecting to play this game mode, and I guarantee you almost nobody in Havoc would complain about the mode, having some more hard modifiers added to it. And this is something that has existed in the past, right? If you played Vermintide 2, there's actually a competitive patch for that game when things like, I believe it's called Onslaught, the competitive tournament series that they host, that's actually, at least it was back in the day, I don't know if it's still true now, but that's actually a different patch than the main live patch for the game, because obviously Fat Shark is not balancing around like uber hardcore players, they're balancing for fun in the main game. But when uber hardcore players are considered, and you're considering a difficulty that's far above what the game is actually intended to be played against, different things must be balanced in order to keep that egalitarian. And it keeps that game mode much more fun. That super hardcore game mode is more fun because there's more diversity, because players have figured out, okay, this is too powerful, this is too weak, this class is too powerful, this is too weak, and they've made changes accordingly. So that balance conditions in Onslaught in the tournament series are way different than they are in the base game. And that can happen in Havoc too. Now, I already noted some ways in which Havoc is different than normal games, but I think they definitely need to go further, and I have one candidate for target here. And I don't know if this will make it Fat Shark, if anyone will even listen to me, but let me know if you have any other ideas about how Havoc could be changed down in the comments, or how maybe you would do this whole thing differently. But I think the number one place to look in terms of balancing Havoc and getting some of this power creep in control is AoE effects. I'm talking Chorus, I'm talking Shout, I'm talking Rumbler, I'm talking Flame Staff, right? These abilities not only provide a ton of safety for your team and are very, very easy to use and get multiplicative power the more coherency the team has, but on the offensive side, they get more value the more enemies are on screen. Rumbler and Flamestaff, they scale perfectly well with enemy density, so you just can't put more enemies on the screen for players to fight, because that'll just be more damage for the Rumbler or Flamestaff user. You're just going to cut through more of them at the same time because it's an AoE effect. So I think if we took an axe to these abilities that are just press button indiscriminately in the direction of enemies and win game, if we took an axe to those sort of things, the balance issues would resolve in a large part. Because right now, as we just saw in the clips we watched with Reginald and the boys, they completely solved that combat encounter by cluster bombing and just like chain bombing their way through the whole map. Everything was exploding, it was CC'd around them, and that just completely foils the enemy attempt to stop them. So if you removed these AoE effects, if you remove the ability to permanently stagger everything in a radius around you by shooting grenades at your feet or over and over and over again, and put it back to a more single target focused meta paradigm where you really need to be using these weapons that are strong at sniping targets and getting rid of them, and the AoE nuke weapons are nerfed to the ground, then your combat equation, your combat puzzle gets way more complicated by necessity. You no longer have a weapon that can just instantly dunk 25% of the enemies in the arena. You have to go and do it yourself manually. And I think that would be a great place to start. It's the best one I can think of anyway. So that's all the ideas I have for today, guys. Let me know if you liked my take on this, if you think maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is probably the most elegant solution and also a very, very feasible solution for Fat Shark. And I'd love to see it implemented because I think it would keep everybody as happy as possible, and therefore Fat Shark's revenue stream will be as happy as possible, and we'll get more updates for the game, and the cycle will continue from there. So thanks for listening, guys. Mr. E is out of here. Bye.